Okay, we have started. I am Dan Bell with the Hampton Roads Innovation Collaborative, and I am joined today by two board members, Alan Hagerman and also Tim Ryan, who seconds as the Executive Director for Startwheel, a very good supportive system in our region for entrepreneurs. The reason that we're on video today is that we are attempting to launch an initiative called the Hampton Roads Innovation Economy. And essentially what that is when you think about all the hundreds of businesses and resources out there in our region, we think that, wow, we should be a real powerhouse. But here we are, ranked 37 as an MSA in the country, and over the course of years, nothing has been done to change that ranking. So our concept is try to create a program which is intended to be good for small to medium-sized businesses in the region, to help them grow, help them access information, know where the resources are, how to use them, etc., but also to give the outside world knowledge about Hampton Roads, who we are, what we do, the amazing amount of resources here, and the investment opportunities. So when we think about developing workforce, when we think about expanding tax bases, et cetera, that is a potential of how we can raise our MSA ranking. So with that, this is a program that we're trying to put together, and a hugely important component of this program is to have a regional system that holds all this immense amount of data and provides that resource directory, et cetera, and almost like a knowledge base, if you will, that is available for internal resources in the region as well as external outside of the region. Now, Alan Hagerman has been kind enough to analyze Startwheel versus I think 3 other companies, and I'll let Alan correct me if that number is wrong. And he's come up with a report that I think is pretty telling. And of course, Tim has been involved along the way in conversations, et cetera. So these are our 2 experts, and we wanted to share this discussion with you because this is going to be an important component of our overall program going forward. Enough from me. And Alan, I'd like to hand it over to you to take the point on that. And then Tim, of course, you're going to drop in on the conversation and discussion of several of these points along the way.
Sounds great.
All right. Go for it, Alan.
So the first thing that I wanted to go through, and these are several documents, and I believe everybody will get copies of them. So I'm not going to detail read the documents, but I wanted to hit the highlights of each one of these. The first document is ecosystem. So our first step was what's already out there that we can just maybe plug in and start using. And of course, their Startwheel already has an environment up and running, but Conway Haskins provided us with some other ecosystem packages that he has worked with groups throughout the country or throughout the state that they use for building their own ecosystems. And so he provided us with 3 different systems. So the first thing I wanted to do was take a look at those existing systems and see what sort of drives them and what's their advantages. And some of them are quite pricey. And what are you getting for those dollars? And so what it did was a basic analysis of the 3 systems. And they were EcoMap, Startup Space, and SourceLink are the 3 products that we looked at. And really, the ecosystem platform is sort of at the center of the world. We have the ecosystem building individuals who are populating that system with information. And there's the people who are really driving that process. And then there's other people who are just sort of contributing additional data along the way. And then all of this is actually consumed by a number of different individuals with different user personas, if you will. they're looking for different things. They might be trying to look for information that's geographic based. They may be looking for information that's technology based or industry segment based, or some combination thereof. Um, and so when I did this analysis, I didn't actually take time and invest time in signing up with each one of them and installing and running through it, an in-depth demo, which of course, if I was buying this for my company, I probably would have. But I did go and read through all of their websites. They all have lots of videos of samples of what goes on. They have links to, example sites of people using their systems. And so I went to all of those sites, and or at least most of those, and looked at those and saw how they were organized. So the interesting thing to me was that they were all, two of the three are actually WordPress based environments. So they, when you sign up with their system, you get essentially a customized WordPress environment, and then you work from that. The third site, EcoMap, they use actually what is a WordPress competitor. They look to be using Drupal, which is another content management system. WordPress, of course, rules the world nowadays. It took over most all of the websites that are doing anything significant. And so it was interesting to me that, if we were to go with one of these other technologies, Startup Space, for example, we would end up with essentially what Startwheel has right now, which is a pretty customized WordPress installation. The difference really was follow-on services. Startup Space and SourceLink also provided additional services to help you grow your ecosystem, to identify content to put in it. EcoMap sort of did all that work up front. They were more focused on finding that data and populating your system to go, to start with out of the gate. And then, there would be growth on it, but they weren't staffed really for doing all that follow-on work, and actually sort of made that comment a couple places in their website that they're a small company and they don't really have those additional services.
Alan, let me ask a question right now. So,
Yep.
so with respect to, and I apologize if it's covered later on, but
No, that's fine.
part of our conversations are, how do we start? I mean, do we open up a system and say, okay, all businesses out there, go ahead and self-populate? Well, that's a lengthy, if not impossible process. Do we employ a list methodology, old school type of thing, or even new school versus old school? But what you're saying is the EcoMap process launches you with a populated system, I think.
Right.
And so essentially everything that we're just talking about, well, can't we do a list or some other more modern technological approach? But they may do all that for us.
They're going to do some of that for us, right? They would do.
Yep.
Yeah. So, they might, the devil's in the details. You'd have to see what they're contracting you for. They may just go and hit some public Google searches and format that data and populate the database. And, unless that initial load had a contract that said, you were going to have 10,000 companies in the database and established all that. They don't really say on their website if they guarantee some percentage or some number, or they just are focused on going out and identifying the segments and getting some of that data loaded for you.
Got it. Thank you.
To give you a starting point. Yep. On all of these sites, when I went to their like their example customers, like the Charlottesville, I forget the hub is in Charlottesville. That was one of them. They have directories available, just like Startwheel does. And when you go to the directory, it really doesn't have any details, at least publicly available, about the things that you're seeing. It's really just, the company name, maybe their logo, and a short description about the company. And that's really about it. And so they don't even provide phone numbers or street addresses or any of those sorts of things. One of them did have it configured where they would show you the street address.
So it's just an
But
entity, and then, well, if you want no more than that, you got to go Google it yourself.
yeah, pretty much,
Mm.
So they'll help you find the database, and those entities in all these cases, the entities are categorized, and will fall in multiple categories, right? So depending on what the company does and what they've identified, they could have them in 3 or 4 different categories. But in all cases, it's the same entity coming up. It's just, here's the name of the company that might interest you, go find them. I didn't even see things like, LinkedIn links, or, links to other social media. I don't know if it's just people didn't want to invest the time in getting that information. But they were all just very basic directories that they put out. Um, most of them had most of them used what we would call templates. So for a given system like SourceSpace, or SourceLink rather, all their sort of example sites really look very similar. They had sort of the same header, and it had the company's logo and some color changes, and then the meat in between, and then there was a footer that looked all the same for all of them, and it had the company logo and some colors down there, but it was really laid out very similar. Some of them did look like they let you sort of change the sequence of things on the front page, but there was you could tell it was definitely a template that all of their customers started out with, at least. Um, there's no way of knowing right now how much customization. It could be that they just give you this template and say, here, go customize it yourself. And those organizations all were like, it's not worth our investment to try to do something different. This is good enough. So we don't know which side that falls on.
Did you, in your analysis, come upon their pricing information?
No, none of them had pricing information publicized.
Mm-hmm.
They all were like, fill out this form to get a demo and contact us for further information.
So I've gone a little bit further with EcoMap, just because of my conversations with the Charlottesville hub,
Right.
and to see what their launch costs were, et cetera, et cetera. And they ended up getting a grant to help them, but it was a fairly material amount of money. It was like 40K, 50K for them to launch with EcoMap. And so even a region the size of Hampton Roads, if we were to go shopping for something like that with an EcoMap, and I would imagine the other systems are going to be fairly competitive, I think that there's an initial launch cost, which could be 40K. And then based on the size of the region, our size of the region, then, it could still be $10, $15, $20,000 a year, situation to maintain. And again, I would have to believe that the systems are, those various entities are fairly competitive.
Yeah, I would believe that they're competitive. And that's the other two. You're paying for, you're paying not only to get that environment set up, but you're paying for their
That's
additional add-on services.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it could be pretty substantial capital to get those up and running. And of course, I mentioned earlier that EcoMap really didn't talk about having a lot of add-on services. And all these were cloud licensed products, which means you're paying monthly or yearly. They want you to have those things up every year, and then they also incorporate user and data limits. So you would have to make sure that you're buying at a level that is going to handle the region plus some growth, hopefully.
So let me ask a question about that. So when we talk about that, and I don't know what the number of companies are that we would like to see populated in this system. And again, it comes down to the conversation of, is it tech only or is it all business? And that's a good conversation to have, because we want all businesses to thrive in Hampton Roads. So we'll kick that can down the road for a little bit. But let's say there were 5,000 companies out there, of all shapes and kinds. So that's a 5,000 user license?
No, so their users to them are going to be the people who are managing the
Gotcha.
EcoMap.
Mhm.
So that's going to be, you know, whoever's logging in and managing it, as well as I didn't see user type tiering. Sometimes they'll have, you know, they might have like a two-tier users, you know, like you might have some free users that can go in and look at things, but they can't really add data. They can't really change anything.
Mhm.
But if they're getting like the ability to add new entries or update an entry or something, those people are going to be charged for because they're actually doing work in the system.
So you have users that the on the administration of the system, by and large. But then let's say, and again, I don't know what the number is. Let's say you got 5,000 companies who are compelled to log into the system a couple times a year or once a quarter, make sure update any information or what have you, keep the information fresh, so that as people are researching what's available within Hampton Roads and where do you get it and all that.
I'm not sure these systems had that. I'm thinking back if I even saw like, you know, click here to update your directory. I'm almost thinking they were all geared towards, you know, you're going to send them a message and say, hey, my information's wrong or whatever. And then your central group is going to have to do that update manually.
Yeah, and just because I ask questions doesn't mean that
No,
means
I mean, that's a great question. That's something
it,
I did not look at. I
doesn't
can go
mean that
back and
it's
look
the
at
right
that.
thing to do. But I mean, in the spirit of whatever we have as a system down the road to reduce the labor intensity, you know, it's something that we would probably want to look at, realizing that anytime it's a balancing act, right? You got labor intensity and you got quality of information. So the accuracy of it. So, you know, to be determined.
And let's see. And then, so then the other thing I did is I kind of did an analysis in here. Okay, if we let's look at Startwheel. You know, Startwheel is already an established organization within the region, and Startwheel uses a WordPress site. You know, it's been customized over the years with some plugins and things and tailored. But you know, at its core, Startwheel is WordPress with some amazing humans backing it up. And so when you look at that, it's really just a competitor to two of the three things. You would end up with the same platform. And so when I looked at some of the features, I went through the company's websites, and this is probably tough to see on a Zoom, and I'm already at the 200%. Let me make sure. Yeah. So it would have to be something you look at in the document. But what I did was go through, this is a separate spreadsheet. And, you know, actually, I think I have it open. Let me see. Yeah, so actually I went through each of the products and the features listed on their web pages and came up with a list of, you know, different things that they were promoting their ecosystem does. And then I compared that to, you know, each one of the groups between SourceLink, Startup Space, and Startwheel. And, you know, it's interesting that a lot of these things are going to be sort of subjective, right? So EcoMap, for example, breaks out a lot of things into specific directories. So, you know, they have a resource directory and a business directory. Whereas, you know, groups like Startwheel have a directory that has sort of everybody in the same pool, and you're going to pick the type of things that you're interested in inside that directory. You know, which is a better approach for your website. You know, it's half dozen one, half dozen of the other. So it makes this comparison a little more tough to do. And things where there is no blank, I just didn't see. That doesn't mean that Startup Space, for example, doesn't have something that EcoMap has. What it means is that they didn't mention either way. So, you know, if they didn't have it, like I'll put no. But if I couldn't determine what they had, instead of putting, you know, undetermined or not available and really making this cloudy, I just left them empty. to make things a little easier to understand when you look at it. Okay, and then, some of the stuff they listed really sounded kind of cool and interesting, but then I couldn't find any other information about what did they mean. So for example, there's a co-working module mentioned for startup space. Well, what does that mean? You're just listing co-working locations, or is this, stuff that co-working locations can use to identify customers? I don't know what co-working module was, but they had it listed on their website as, part of the product at the one level that you could have access to. Same with cohort management. What does that mean? So if that's something, eventually, that we've been focused on the directory, so I didn't spend a lot of time trying to track that down, or, give them a call, and I can always do that if we need to.
In the context of some of the things that are happening in our region, well, as well as many others, but accelerators, it seems like some of those terms, co-working module and cohort management, might be something associated to how to manage an accelerator with this system. Just a thought.
Yeah, is that outside the scope of what we're looking for?
Yes.
I thought it was, so
Yeah.
I didn't
No,
really spend any time looking into that.
No.
So this is another document that can get shared. And that was just, I just linked it in here, so that's why it's so small here. And there's a link to the Google Sheet in the document. So I did that sort of feature by feature comparison. And then I went and did just a small couple paragraphs about each one that just sort of say, what did it do? And, like EcoMap, all the sites were the same visually. And, I should turn off my, I've been doing this and I didn't realize I still had my Grammarly turned on. So you'll have to excuse Grammarly yelling at me. Startup space, these were some of the things that they had mentioned that I wasn't sure were something that we were interested in. And then SourceLink probably was the most comprehensive environment. That's actually out of the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And so, it sort of came out of an educational space. And so it's obvious that they've been throwing a lot of different resources available, to it to expand it. So they've actually, but they also had probably the worst site for trying to get information about products, that they're trying to sell and promote. So they ended up having something they call the Resource Navigator, which was pretty much just the WordPress directory. It's how you're going to create a directory of all the stuff. And it looks like that's what they used to do, is just sort of give people a WordPress page and, plug in and let them go do their thing after they got them started. And then they added this thing called Site Connects, which is basically a hosted WordPress that they made available. So it really had a lot of reference information. They do a lot of webinars and, white papers and things like that on building an ecosystem. So they probably had the most additional information, but I didn't see it behind the paywall. So, it can still just be a reference to look and see what might be useful in our environment. And so I looked at those, and that was, and then at the end of this is just a list of some of the references and some example sites that I looked at to see what they did with them. And so that was the ecosystem database comparison. So I started with that, and then I went and did an analysis on, for us in Hampton Roads, now that we kind of understand what we can buy as far as platforms and environments to get started with, what makes sense for us in our region. And so I came up with, we really probably had 4 approaches to do our project, the innovative collaborative project here. And one is we can use an ecosystem building platform like the 3 that are in the other comparison. We can use Startwheel as a model, which ends up being, giving us a good start, and is cheaper than the other 3. We could partner with Startwheel and just create yet another regionally focused organization platform, or we could get on board and try to help Startwheel be more successful in its goals and invest. We already use them as a starting point, and we could just help them grow and incorporate the additional data as we can come up with it throughout the region. And so what I did there is, it's important that you understand that in all of these, even the 3 purchased ones, the platform is the simplest decision. The rest of it is all about the effort to develop the data that's going to go into the platform. I had come up with what I felt were some needs and objectives for this environment. We need to know that it's accurate and it's current and it's complete. People get turned off when they go to use a resource. I Google something and it comes up and the business has been closed, or they are no longer at that location or whatever. So having some trustworthiness in the data is going to be important. We of course need to categorize it. We want to control access. It'd be nice to have this directory, but if it's anybody in the world can pull mailing information off of it, the spammers will be right there pulling mailing information off of it, or phones, numbers, or whatever. So we have to worry about how we present this information. Maybe different people will have different levels of data they get to. Maybe if you're in the public, you don't see details, but if you register with Startwheel, like let's say your business is in our directory and you register, that now gives you access to the other information, because you're sort of agreed that you're not going to abuse it. Of course, there's lots of different ways geographically to group things. We have to look at how would we geographically group things. Multiple visualizations. Tim, I love Startwheel, but that directory drives me crazy trying to find data in it, because there's so much, the way it's formatted visually. I'm a nerd. I'm really looking at I want to see grids for me, because I want to be able to sort it and look at one line per thing and get what I need. Somehow, if we have multiple people contributing data, we might need to provide some sort of, link back, or, credit them for that data. That might be nice to promote some additional people in getting involved. We want to, of course, promote the regionalism. I mean, that's the whole reason to have it, and high availability. If some guy's in California looking to open an office, we want to make sure that if he's searching at 9 o'clock at night his time, that the site's up, after midnight our time. Some considerations that I put in play that I came up with, we don't really have a lot of staff. We do have an existing WordPress site, we as an HRIC. You're always going to need humans to manage the data, moderate the data. I didn't know if we had to support Spanish or any other languages in this area. We haven't really had that conversation.
Oh, it's a great question to ask, and as we look at diversity and inclusion throughout the region, there's certainly an opportunity to look at the multiple language support. Certainly, I don't know how important it is day one. I don't know if it's doable day one, but certainly it's something we can think about.
We want to support the regionalism narrative. We'll need to come up with some personas for who's using the directory, what kinds of individuals, and for those kinds of individuals, what are they looking for, right? What do we think that what's going to be important to those people?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Just to loop back on the like the Spanish language support too. When we start thinking about who's the customer for a system like this, there's 2 customers at least, the internal customer and the external customer. So who's to say that the Spanish language support wouldn't be more used from an international perspective as they're researching what is Hampton Roads, who's in Hampton Roads, what's it comprised of, what kind of resources are there, for me to either access, or what if I wanted to move my business into Hampton Roads. So, sorry, that thought
Yeah,
bubble,
no.
that bubble just
Um,
popped up too.
Anybody that has a millennial knows that it's got to work on a cell phone. You
Sure.
know, my daughter doesn't do anything that's not on her cell phone, it seems. And then, for HRIC specific data, we talk in terms of we want to make sure we have tech representative, but what is tech? What things are we going to loop under tech? And then, what would we, with going through this effort, how are we going to define our win? Right? How do we declare that this project was successful, both in the short term and then long term? Over the long term, how do we declare it successful? We'll need some sort of measurements for that. So I went through each of the 4 approaches I mentioned earlier and just talked about, looked at each one of those approaches and talked about some pros and cons. If we wanted to spend yearly capital, we could do one of the existing ecosystem building platforms. There's probably some open source projects that you could find that you could build on, but you're trading cash for labor and then also administration. And then if we did do with one of these, we would have to talk about in the contract, what are SLAs? Where's that data live? If the data only lives in their database, can I get to it? Can I do some other querying on it? How do we get to our data? For the ones that are, well, even Drupal has plugins. So, are we stuck with what they give us? Are they managing it? If Dan finds this really cool plugin that generates QR codes or something, and we want to put that on our site, is that something we can even do? So there's some challenges to using the shared ecosystem, and also I think it ends up making it much likelier that we're going to end up in a competitive position with other organizations because you're going to be able to and encouraged to store so much more data in it. The vendors are going to want you to store as much data as you can because that's how they raise their rates. So I think that that's a challenge for us as well politically to manage. And, in the end, I said that this approach lets us have an independent technology platform. HRIC has its own environment, and it may or may not it may and probably will overlap other organizations. And that may be a challenge for us. And in the end, it didn't really get us that much farther than partnering with Startwheel to start with. And that was approach number 2. Startwheel has a WordPress database already. They have some plugins they're using for events and the directory. Theoretically, we could just get Tim and say, hey Tim, be a nice guy and tell us all your secret sauce of what you're using in your WordPress site, and we'll put the same things in ours. But in the end, it makes us competitive with Startwheel, and it's not really leveraging Startwheel. I mean, unless Tim was like, say, hey, here, take my whole WordPress database with all my data and everything, and you can go ahead and just start running with that. And I'm going to keep Startwheel over here. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to do that. So I couldn't really think of any real benefits to starting with our own WordPress database and basically cloning Startwheel and reproducing the wheel, so to speak. I just couldn't come up with any benefits, especially to Startwheel. What's Tim's win in that? He's being a nice guy and helping us out, but we're just going to be stealing people and traffic from his website and not promoting his website, so there's not really a win for him. So I wasn't a real fan of this approach, and it just didn't produce regionalism. Now here's a clone of Startwheel competing with Startwheel. There's no win for the region in that either. So
it's real important to as we look at projects like this and the components of the project, et cetera. Leading by example is a thing to do.
And along that same vein, maybe we go and we partner with Startwheel and we start yet another Hampton Roads regional entity that's going to be just this sort of directory entity. That's what it exists for. And that's certainly a possibility. But once again, there just wasn't a lot of wind there. And now we've created yet another voice trying to promote regionalism and talking about the region. And there's once again no win for Start Wheel, and there's no win for HRIC. And so that you're introducing a ton of complexity with setting up an LLC and organizations and working out who's going to do what. And in the end, it's just really the two groups, Start Wheel and HRIC. So I don't really think that that's going to be providing a lot of benefits. And then the final approach, which really made the most sense to me, was, instead of starting with Start Wheel or competing against Start Wheel, why don't we just take what they have and build on it? And this to me really is the thing that it's quickest out the gate for us, because Start Wheel is already there and it already has a directory and it already has businesses and categories. And so we start with more of a review of Start Wheel and say, okay, are there some additional categories we need to support the tech space? Are there some additional categories to support whatever? And then we have to start looking at, okay, how can we start getting more data for Start Wheel? And it is on WordPress, so if we have to, we can create technology pages. Tim can throw together a page called Tech Zone, for example, and that's where technology people bookmark and they go there first. But it's still Tech Zone. It's a Start Wheel page on startwheel.org. So you're still getting the traffic to the site. They're still seeing they know it's Start Wheel and all that, but it's sort of technology focused. Maybe that's what HRIC needs. And so there's lots of options we have going forward with this, because it is so flexible of a platform. And nobody shoots the leader. You're first out the gate with this directory. We can start looking at promoting it. We can start seeing what other things, what are the big holes, start doing a gap analysis with Start Wheel and saying, okay, Tim, what do you think you're the lightest on here? What sort of things we need to look at building out? Same thing with working with the economic people. Okay, for businesses looking to relocate in Virginia Beach, what are we missing here? We need to come up with a section on government resources that is just from each city. So plus this is a reasonable cost entity. I mean, if we partner with Start Wheel, we need to, we're going to need to give them some cash, or help offset especially the additional costs that we're bringing to the table, and look at what does that mean. It might be, Tim's pretty frugal, so I'm not sure it's going to be tens of thousands of dollars a year in costs, but that's something we can work on. I mean, if we go to Tim and go, hey, we need to buy this plugin and it's $200, that's something Start Wheel probably should pay for if they're going to say you need to put this in your WordPress site. So there's a lot of advantages to doing it with Start Wheel, and I had a little summary here, and approaches 1 and 2 were pretty similar, other than cost. Using Start Wheel would be a lot cheaper, but you still end up with the same platform at the end. Approach 3, which was to create a new regional entity, also is similar to those two, but you have all this additional overhead of setting up a joint organization and infrastructure. And if nobody but HRIC and Start Wheel are going to be involved with that, there's no advantage to doing that, right? There's no reason in creating a big organization for only 2 people. And so I really felt that approach 4 was the quickest option. So Tim, you've got 30 seconds to jump in with any comments, because I know you have to jump out here at the top of the hour.
No, I appreciate the time that you spent doing this. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting to me is that we were doing this just because Start Wheel were doing this is because it was the right thing to do for the region. If Start Wheel is selected, I appreciate you phrasing it in terms of HRIC helps grow Start Wheel, but I really think that this helps grow everybody. I mean, this is a win-win-win across the board. The only thing that I would really add in addition to what you did was another advantage of using Start Wheel. One, if there is customization involved, then we don't have to go and have someone else build something custom for us. We can do that internally with the partnership that we have with one another. 2, the other thing that would make it easier is the fact that people are already going to the site for events. They're going to the site for news. They've already gone to the site to start self-populating the resource directory that we currently have. So it's not changing behavior of people. It would just be adding to the behavior that's already in existence. And then the other thing that quickly that I would add would be like if another pandemic happened or if there was grant opportunities or there was another idol or anything like that, we could filter out, hey, we can do a query, who are all the home-based businesses, who are the restaurants, who are these categories of people, and then that's one way we would have an approach to contact all of those people within whatever parameters are that we're looking for. So there will be a benefit from that way as well. But I appreciate the time that you put into this, Alan.
Yes, I do too. And I thank Tim for everything he's doing for the region as well through Startwheel and his efforts. So, our project, we're going to wrap up the session very, very shortly here. So where I think we're at is we're making thought progress in terms of the direction of the innovation economy effort. The system is a huge component of this initiative. And as Alan pointed out, there's lots of other activity involved as well, but you got to have a good system and the system's got to have good data in it. And it's got to be available to a lot of different people and entities out there to see what's going on in Hampton Roads. It seems to me, I think, Alan, you have made your recommendation that what makes the most sense to everybody is for us to work with Tim and help to expand Startwheel to support the effort to the level that we need, and of course that would involve some things we all know that will, and that's logical. Tim, I think it sounds like that's the most viable option from your perspective too. Why wouldn't it be, right? And so I have to go along with the opinions of both you and you guys, and I endorse the direction of working with Tim and Startwheel to expand it to support our innovation economy project. This video, gentlemen, I'm assuming that you approve my ability to share this video with various entities around the region, because we're trying to get some traction on this, and this would be a huge thing to say, yep, this is the decision. So we're going to share it with the HRIC board, and then we're going to share it with other external entities in the region, and hopefully we can come to a conclusion. I don't know that we'll come to a conclusion in May, but certainly no later than early June, in my opinion, that the collective wisdom from HRIC and the Startwheel organization, because Tim's got his own board there and a couple other people out there, are that this is what we need to do. Does that all make sense to you guys?
Sounds great.
All right.
Yep, I'll clean up the documents a little bit and make a 1.0 final version of that that we can then share. You can share to whoever, Dan.
That would be great, Ellen. I'd like to include those documents as an attachment with the email with the link to the video, if that's okay.
Yep. Yeah, I should have those up to you tomorrow.
Outstanding. All right, guys. Well, listen, thank you. Great session.
All right.
Alan, thanks for your analysis. Just incredibly valuable. And I look forward to moving the project forward.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Alan.
All right.
Bye.
See you.
See you.